Well, here we go with your Phil Steele Plus tour with selections. Another big winning Friday for you last week. Let's hope we have another one for you again this week. Up for you today, I'll have some FCS plays. There's some playoffs going on this week, naturally. NFL, and of course, FBS. 5 big free selections for you today, even with a limited card. I mean, normally we're looking at 60 college games. This week we've got 10 in the FBS and 8 in the FCS. Before I get to it, a couple of quick notes for you. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. That is at PhilSteele042. That's at PhilSteele042. I'll give you all the latest injuries, as you could tell here. I mean, you just go through on a daily basis. If there's a player transferring, if there's an injury, we catch it. We put it up here. Keeps you up to date, all the latest things happening in college football. Also, I posted the average game grades for the FCS. As you can see, James Madison has taken over the top spot in my average game grades for the entire season, but it's close. And how do you go against North Dakota State? They've been the premium team in FCS. I think that will be a heck of a championship matchup. Sure looks like we're headed that way. Interesting looking in the rankings that Central Arkansas is seeded 8th. Right now they come in number 29 in my average game grades. And the other one that's interesting is Southern Illinois is number 8 in my average game grades. Somehow Southern Illinois didn't even make the playoff this year. Little bit of a thing in that one. But so do check out at PhilSteele042. Disappointed to see Jeff Tedford stepping down. As you know, he was my National Coach of the Year last year. Check out the magazine. I list the National Coach of the Year each year. Coach Tedford stepping down, it looks like, at Fresno State, so that's a little bit disappointing. So do check it out if you want to keep up to date with what's happening in college football. I give you all the latest injury news as well as transfer news as well. Recapping last week, we had a couple of FCS plays, just in case you're following along here. One of them, and it wasn't this team, it was we had Monmouth -7 over Holy Cross last week. I said my computer had Monmouth winning by 17. Look at that. They won the game by 17 points. They actually had a big lead, gave up some points late, but a 17-point win for Monmouth last week. And then talked about the option versus the option. Look at the yards in this game. 16 first downs to 12, 350 to 282 in the yards. Kennesaw State did hold Wofford to 143 yards below their season average. So it was the defensive struggle expected when you match up option versus option. So a couple of nice winners there. Let's start out with an FCS play for you this week. And once again, just go to the FCS pages. I always line them up. Visitor on the left, home team on the right. I think that's the best way to go. Albany is on the left. And we take a look at the team on the right. It is Montana State. So let's take a look at this matchup here this week. We see that Albany last week just beat Central Connecticut State to win their playoff game 42-14. Very impressive win in that one. But here's the interesting thing. Albany now has a long trip all the way across the country. Now, are they used to these long trips, traveling all the way across 3 time zones, going out to Montana for this one? Well, the answer is no. If you take a look, Albany has not really been a playoff team. Losing record, didn't make the playoff. In fact, they've only made the playoffs once in their school history. That was in 2011. They made the playoff, played Stony Brook, ended up losing by 3. So they're not a team that's used to the playoff. They did play very well. It's a home playoff game last week, but now they're making a long road trip all the way out to Montana to take on a rested Montana State. So I like that situation. Montana State is a team that's been in the playoff. Last year, they did lose to North Dakota State. Of course, a lot of teams do that, and that was on the road. But at least they got that playoff experience going. Now, one thing on PhilSteele.com and the Phil Steele Plus, individual player stats, you can check them out all season long. You can see who your quarterback has been. As you can see here, Tucker Rovig actually missed the Sacramento State game, it looks like. Wasn't even the starter at the beginning of the year and then took over and has been the starter since. Montana State's playing some pretty good ball right now. Take a look at their last 4 weeks. They beat Southern Utah 42-7, Northern Colorado, UC Davis. And how about this one? They beat Montana 48-14. Now, Montana, as I showed you, was number 5 in my average game grades. They drilled them at home 488-241. So you've got a Montana State team that's playing in good current form. In fact, over the last 4 weeks, their average game grade is 85.0, as you can see down here under the last 4 weeks section. And the average game grade for Albany just 70. So that's a 15-point difference right there. factor in the home field edge, it's actually calling the average game grades the last 4 weeks is calling for Montana State to win this by 17.6. Now, they're a 9-point favorite in this game. And as mentioned, they just beat a very good Montana team by 34 points at home. It's a rare trip west for Albany, a rare playoff game for Albany. That's their first road playoff game, coming off a big game, traveling across the country. They really rare. I don't even know if they've crossed the Mississippi River, let alone play out in Montana. And my computer's got Montana State winning this one, 34-17, another 17-point win with a 410 to 287 yard edge. So I'm going to take Montana State -9 over Albany as the first of your FCS plays. Now, the second one is interesting. We're going to take a look at a team in Austin Peay against Cal State Sacramento. Now, you guys know Sacramento State has been a team that I've been hot on all year here. At the start of the year, I mentioned, I think it was week 4, that my average game grades actually had Sacramento State in the top 10, I believe, and they were not ranked. It was after this Eastern Washington game. And it took a couple weeks for the FCS to actually get Sacramento State into their top 25, where they had been in my top 10. They had been playing extremely well. And now Sacramento State enters into this as one of the top seeds. As well they should. They've had a great season. Kevin Thompson got a 25-8 ratio this year. And this week they are playing Austin Peay. Now, Austin Peay lost their head coach. He went off to the Charlotte and had a really good year with Charlotte this year. But look who their new head coach is. It's Mark Hudspeth. I talked to Coach Hudspeth every year when he was at Louisiana. And if we take a look at Louisiana, I'm going to go to FBS for this. Let's go to Louisiana and the Sun Belt. And the good thing here about Phil Steele Plus, when you check on the last 40 years' results, all this is at your fingertips. Move that over a little bit so you can see it. You get every result in every game back to 1976. Here in Louisiana, we have results back to 88. But this tells you who the head coach was. So if you want to know when Mark Hudspeth was the head coach, it's from 11 to 17. And let's take a look at his bowl years. They played in the New Orleans Bowl in 11, an underdog, went outright. In 12, they played in the New Orleans Bowl, beat East Carolina by 9, covered. At Tulane in 2013, underdog, won outright. 2014, Nevada, underdog, won outright. And 2016, +6.5, lost by 7. So in his 5 postseason games with Louisiana, Hudspeth was 4-1 in the bowls. His lone loss was here to Southern Miss. Didn't lose a game by more than 7, and that one loss against the spread was by a half point. I mentioned that because Austin Peay is a 13-point dog here. And we're not looking at Louisiana. We're going to go back to the FCS team pages now, and we're going to take a look at Austin Peay over here on the left. So last week, Austin Peay played Furman, and they beat them 42-6. Very impressive home win for Austin Peay last week. Their quarterback, Javon Craig, let's go take a look at what kind of season he's having this year. If you take a look at the top here, Craig did not start the opener. It was here. Craig took over. Has had a pretty good season, and he began rather slow, a 1-1, 2-1, 3-3 ratio. So after 4 games, he had a 3-3 ratio. That means he's got a 22-7 ratio since then. Last week, he was 18-23 against Furman, a 3-0 ratio. So he's playing pretty good football right now. And this, in a first year of a new head coach, takes a little bit of time to get used to the coaching. So they lost 3 games early on, but look how they're playing right now. 4 big wins. The defense, the last 4 weeks, given up 244 yards per game. They're outsgaining foes by 186 yards per game and playing to an average game grade of 82.7. Now, Sac State, as I said, you heard me talk about them every week on Phil Steele Plus. Very high on them. Kept saying underrated. Well, the ratings finally caught up to them about here. That's when the FCS top 25 rankings caught up to my average game grade rankings. They actually lost to Weber State. They did beat Northern Arizona by 4. Let's go take a look at Northern Arizona. And once again, this is the beautiful thing about Phil Steele Plus and how to use it. All this information's at your fingertips. So you want to know about Northern Arizona? Let's click on it. Become an expert on Northern Arizona. Here's the type of year they're having this year. 4 wins, 7 or 8 losses this year, giving up 520 yards per game. So they only beat Northern Arizona by 4 on the road. And then last week, or in their last game, I should say, they played UC Davis. So once again, we'll click on UC Davis over here. See UC Davis having a losing year, giving up 444 yards per game, being outgained on the season. They beat them by 10. Now they're laying 13 to Austin Peay, an Austin Peay team that's in pretty good current form. And if you look at the last 4 weeks' numbers for Sacramento State, you can see that it's 76.5 versus 82.7. That's actually saying Austin Peay wins this game. Now, my computer's got the game a toss-up. It does have Cal State Sacramento winning at 26-25. And here's the thing. Austin Peay doesn't play that bad on the road. They average 165 yards per game at home, plus 100 yards per game on the road. So they're pretty good on the road as they are at home. So I like that. They travel well. They've got a head coach that's used to the postseason, a guy that's 5-1 in postseason games with his largest loss by 7. The current form, the last 4 weeks, says Austin Peay's playing good. And look at this. Austin Peay's got my number 6 defense in the FCS, holding opponents to 71 yards per game below their season average. Now, Cal State Sacramento is number 4 at 78, but as you can tell, the defenses are pretty close. Also, when I do look at that, I say, well, you might have a lower scoring game here with 2 outstanding defenses. The total's 56. You might want to give that a look as well. But the official play here, we're going to go with Austin Peay plus 13 over Cal State Sacramento. That's Austin Peay plus 13 over Cal State Sacramento as your official play. And hopefully you learned a little bit how to use all the different rankings and things here on Phil Steele Plus. For this next one, we're going to take a look, go to the NFL. Now, the NFL had a loss last week, so it's been a little disappointing. I think that's 2 straight losses for the NFL at least. Let's hope we get back and bounce back with the win. We're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions on the left, and we're going to take a look at the Minnesota Vikings on the right. Now, you remember way, way back, I think it was the second week of Phil Steele Plus, I brought up a little thing, and I showed you the workbook page for Minnesota. I'm going to show that to you again. I produce this workbook every year, which gives you the NFL, the last 20 years results, tells you who the coach was, gives you these spread records, both straight up and against the spread. Go to philsteele.com. You can purchase that workbook. But here I honed in on the home favorite for Minnesota. 4-2-1, 5-1, 4-2, 6-0. That's a pretty doggone good record as a home favorite for Minnesota. As you could tell, that's 19 wins, 5 losses, and 1 tie heading into the season. So they were really good in that role, and they did cover that week. The week we used them, I believe it was against Atlanta, and they did cover against the Atlanta Falcons in that game. So you've got a Minnesota Viking team that's really good as a home favorite. Now they're laying 13. And the one thing I noticed about the NFL scores last week, it seemed like there's a lot of unusual results. A lot of teams that never win were winning. A lot of teams that usually win were losing. It's pretty strange. So it makes you a little leery about laying 13. But here's 2 more factors I looked at closer when I was looking at this game that made me pick Minnesota minus the 13 in this one. Here's the first one. I was wondering, how does Detroit react after losing on Thanksgiving? So I looked at the last 2 years. Last year, they lost to the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving, 23-16, tough loss. The next week, they played the Rams at home. They lost by 14 points in that game. So a 14-point loss at home to the Rams, and the Rams, so there was a 14-point loss. The previous year, take a look here. They played Chicago at home. No, that's 18. Sorry, excuse me. They played Minnesota at home. They lost by 7. So once again, they get all fired up. It's Thanksgiving. It's national TV. You lose the game. How'd they do the next week? They went on the road to play Baltimore. They were down 20-0 at the half. Lost the game 44-24. So there has been a Thanksgiving thing. They get fired up. It's like their Super Bowl game because they're going nowhere. The Lions last year were going nowhere. And then they lost to the Rams at home after Thanksgiving. This year, they're going nowhere. There's no playoffs. There's no hope. And if you look at the quarterback stats, individual player stats, Stafford went out. They went to Driscoll. Now they're down to David Blau. They're a banged-up team on both sides of the football. So you got a banged-up Detroit team going nowhere, off their Super Bowl, playing on the road. And we know Minnesota's a great home favorite. But I was looking at it a little bit closer this morning just to see if I could find something else. Let's go back to 17. The Vikings are off a loss. I like premier teams when they're off a loss, right? So how do the Vikings do off a loss when they're at home? Well, here, they lost in 2017 to the Pittsburgh Steelers by 17 points. They came home and beat Tampa Bay by 17. I like that. Next time they lost and came home, they lost to Carolina on the road. They beat Cincinnati at home by 27. So those are 27 and 17-point wins if they were off a loss and coming back home to where they're extremely tough, a great home favorite. So 2018, let's take a look. Here's a loss, but they were on the road. They had lost the Rams, but they were on the road, so it doesn't count. They played the Saints and lost. The next week they were home against Detroit. They won 24-9. That's a 15-point win at home. They lost to the Bears. They come home to Green Bay, and they did only win by 7, but I think the line was something like pick for that game. It was a lot closer. They covered that game against Green Bay. They lost to Seattle here. Come home against Miami, beat them 41-17. So their wins were by 15, 7, and 24. So far this year, they lost to Green Bay, came home against Oakland, beat them by 20. Lost to Chicago, but they were on the road, doesn't count. Lost to Kansas City, but they were on the road, doesn't count. Lost to Seattle, they're at home. So the last 6 times in the last 3 years, the Minnesota Vikings have lost and then been a home favorite the next week. They have won by an average of 18.3 points per game. So you've got a great home favorite, a team that's off a loss and does well off a loss at home, versus a team that's off their Super Bowl, playing on the road. In the last 2 years, they've lost by double digits in that factor. And they're injury-plagued. And the Vikings have beaten Detroit the last 3, 42-30. Last year, they beat Detroit 24-9. They beat Detroit 27-9. So they play well against Detroit. They're at home. I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to lay the 13. Vikings minus 13 over Detroit is your NFL play this week. Also, I want to remind you, when you click on the homepage here, 2 things. Well, I forgot to mention to you about Inside the Press Box, my newsletter, the weekly newsletter. If you type in the code STEEL19, give you $10 off any subscription to Inside the Press Box, 50% off a single issue. So if you want this week's single issue, 50% off. But we've got start to sell the postseason package now. This one up here is for the college and pro through the Super Bowl. That's this week college, 4 weeks of NFL, plus the postseason package. Really good deal, $129, $119. This is the remaining 4 weeks of the NFL. But if you just want the postseason, talking about 40 college bowl games, 4 weeks of NFL playoffs, all that's $89. Right now, $79. If you type in the code word STEEL19, you can go to InsideThePressBox.com to get that. That's InsideThePressBox.com, and you can pick up on that. And all subscriptions include Phil Steele Plus for free. And once again, with Phil Steele Plus, if you go to our website right here and go to the store, here it is, and we click on Phil Steele Plus, you can see what the price is. It's $44 right now. Take you through the Super Bowl. That's NFL, FBS, FCS. Take $5 off. Type in the code word winners when you sign up. Get it for $39. Or if you're just interested in the FCS playoffs, $19 right now with the code winners. So sign up for Phil Steele Plus, or just sign up for Inside the Press Box for the postseason. Get Phil Steele Plus for free, for crying out loud. It's all up there right now. Just go to philsteele.com, go to the store, sign up for it right there. All right, let's go talk about these 2 college games for this week. Let me go over some NFL info real quick. This is up there each week, the NFL strength of wins, pain of losses. Who's got the best record? Seattle right now, 54-4. The teams they've lost to have lost a total of 4 games. That's pretty good. The teams they beat have won a total of 54 games. So Seattle, San Francisco, New England, Baltimore all at the top. As you would expect, Cincinnati, the Giants, Arizona, Washington, Detroit, Miami all at the bottom in that category. And the other one we put up each week is in the NFL is the average. How do you fare against the opponent averages? San Francisco is still number 1 at plus 112 yards per game above opponent averages. Look at this. Dallas Cowboys, prior to last week, still number 2. New England, number 3. Here's the teams down below. You can see the Bears were down below as well. So those are a couple interesting things we post each week on philsteele.com. Let's talk about those 2 college selections. And the first one, we're going to take a look at a big game. We're going to take a look at the SEC championship game. Now, Georgia's in the game's being played in Atlanta, so I'm going to put Georgia on the right. You know, I like to put the home team on the right, the visitor on the left. Got to get to FBS here. FBS, and we're going to go to Georgia on the right and LSU on the left. So here's what I'm looking at when I look at this game. The first thing is Georgia in SEC action has not topped 27 points per game since October the 5th against Tennessee. They're only averaging 25 points per game in conference play. They play in the weaker of the 2 divisions. They're in there with Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. Meanwhile, LSU's in the same division as Auburn, Alabama. So that's one thing to look at, is that Georgia has been struggling offensively against SEC. Now, Georgia's top 2 receivers, everybody's talking about how Jake Fromm is struggling these last bunch of games, and he is. Look how Fromm's numbers, 11 of 23 for 163, 50% completions here against Georgia Tech, under 50% here, under 50% here. Well, a big part of that reason, if you click on the individual player stats, you see that Lawrence Cager's his top receiver, leading the team in receiving, 132, 93 yards. Cager gets hurt against Auburn, hasn't played, and he's out for this one. George Pickens, a freshman, takes over, 57 yards, 41 yards, but guess what? He's missing the first half. So if you look at Georgia, their big question mark coming into the season was the receiving core. It was very inexperienced. Now you've taken away your top guy, Cager is out. Pickens going to miss the first half. LSU's got NFL caliber DBs. They should be able to line up their DBs, play them one-on-one on the Georgia receivers, bring the extra man in the box. DeAndre Swift, not 100%. He's banged up. If you take away Swift, and Fromm's been hitting under 50% in SEC action, I think LSU's defense can play well, much like they did against Texas A&M. Then we take a look at A&M's offense. Now, LSU's offense. LSU's offense, their weakest game of the year was 23 points against Auburn, but they had 30 first downs, 508 yards in that game. So they actually moved the ball extremely well against a very good Auburn team. They had 201 yards above what Auburn averages. In fact, on the season, they're averaging 187 yards above what their opponents normally allow. So I think LSU can move the ball on anybody. So I'm looking at Georgia not being able to move that ball that great. LSU, their usual self, being able to move the ball. And each team in their last SEC game, LSU beat A&M 50-7. They had a 384-yard edge. Georgia beat A&M by 6, but they were actually outgained by 14 yards. A&M had a 274, 260-yard edge. So add it up. I like LSU. And keep in mind, last year, these two teams did play. LSU was not as good as this year's LSU team. Georgia, I feel, was playing better football last year. Georgia was clearly one of the best teams in the country, nearly beat Alabama in the SEC title game. In that game, LSU led 16-0 at the half, won the game 36-16, and there was nothing fluky about it. If you look at 2018, they outgained them by 153 yards, outrushed them 275-113, controlled the line of scrimmage, and like I said, LSU's an improved team. So add it all up, I like LSU. I like them -7 against Georgia. I understand Georgia's played in the SEC title game, probably should have beaten Alabama here, led the entire game. Did beat Auburn here. Auburn had a banged-up running back as well in that game, so we'll wonder if DeAndre Swift is like the Auburn running backs were for that game. They could be in trouble there. I'm taking LSU -7 over Georgia as an official play. Now, the final one, and I normally don't dabble in big lines. Normally, once the line gets over 21, 28, I just sort of shy away from it. But I am going to bring this other one up just because I've been talking about Clemson all year. I've been talking about them. I think we went on, a 5-week thing where I just kept getting on my soapbox saying, why are people saying Clemson's not a good football team? This is ridiculous. They're dominating everybody. They've had one bad game. North Carolina, 21-20. They won that game. They outgained North Carolina by 41 yards. That was their worst game of the season. They are 9-2 against the spread this year, people. 9-2. That means they have outperformed expectations 9 of the 11 weeks. The other game that they did not cover besides North Carolina was Texas A&M, and as you recall, they led that thing 24-3. A&M got the ball. They drove in the final 5 minutes and 49 seconds, 91 yards, 16 plays, and scored a touchdown with 6 seconds left to make it 24-10. That was basically a 24-3 win. Clemson dominated that game as well. They've dominated every opponent all year long. And once again, for a good portion of this season, I had to listen to a lot of national analysts say, well, Clemson's not a very good team. They don't even deserve to be in the playoffs. So you heard about that soapbox all year. I'm done talking about that. But let's talk right now about this particular matchup. And I like to take teams that are in a plus situation. In other words, last week, Clemson didn't extend itself. They led against South Carolina 24-3 at the half. They had a 314, 99-yard edge, played a lot of backups, coasted through the second half, still won the game by 35 points on the road against their rival. Very impressive. 30-9 first downs. So we have a fresh Clemson, one that's fully loaded. Virginia, meanwhile, if you look at what they just did, they just played Virginia Tech. And once again, if you click on Virginia Tech, click on the opponent, the last 15 years matchups lineup, they had lost to Virginia Tech 15 straight years. That was a huge game. They are at home. If they win, they're in the ACC championship game. They need to end this 15-game losing streak to Virginia Tech. That was an A++ game for Virginia. Now, they won the game by 9. But if you're watching the game, it really wasn't a 9-point win. Virginia Tech played extremely well. The Cavaliers were down 30-27. They got a field goal here. And once again, if you just click on box, it shows you these. They got a field goal to tie the game with 7:35 left. They got a field goal with 1:23 left to take the lead. And then Virginia Tech was sacked in the end zone for a fumble. And Virginia fell on it for a deceiving 9-point win. Virginia Tech had a 25-14 first down edge in the game and had leads of 27-20, 30-27, 20-13. Virginia Tech appeared like they were on their way to a win in that game. So Virginia had to exert itself completely last week. Now they've got to go on the road, play Clemson the very next week. And if you look at the current form and how they played against the ACC this year, Clemson's just absolutely dominated. Average win by 35 points per game, blow out their opponents 320 yards per game, and that's playing backups in the fourth quarter. They're playing 110 players in some of their games. Look at Virginia's games against the ACC. This game was a lot closer. Fourth quarter, comeback win. How about Florida State? Same thing, fourth quarter comeback win. Click on the box, and it shows you that they trailed this game 24-17, 24-23. Virginia gets a touchdown with 2:34 left to pull out the win against Florida State. They had a couple of close games. You look at the Georgia Tech game. Not a very good Georgia Tech team. Only beat them by 5. North Carolina only beat them by 7. And that was 17-17 at the half. They lost to Miami. They lost to Louisville. And the teams that they did beat Duke 48-14, and they beat Pitt by 16 on the road. Although in that game, they only had a 20-15 first down edge. They were +2 in turnovers. So overall in ACC play, they're plus 28 yards per game. Look at their secondary. Their secondary is very injury-plagued right now. In the last 3 games, Virginia has given up 302 yards per game passing. So I think that this guy here, Trevor Lawrence, who was so maligned during the season, I'm not getting back into that again, but he was. Over the last 5 weeks, how about 7-0, 10-0, 13-0, 16-0 ratio? This guy is 16-19, 12-16, 20-27, 21-27, 26-36 against this Virginia secondary, giving up over 300 yards per game. Wow, I like that. Now, can teams put their foot down in conference championships? Well, let's take a look. 42-10. Last year, Clemson won by 32. They played Miami of Florida 38-3. Beat them by 35 points. So both the ACC championships the last 2 years, they've won by 30-plus points. So they've done well in the title games. Right now, Clemson is number 2 in my average game grades. Ohio State's number 1. Clemson's number 2 at 117.5. Virginia is number 51 in my average game grades. 51. So you got the number 51 team in the country against number 2. Banged up secondary, coming off a huge effort just to get here. Clemson fresh and ready. Haven't really been tested. Resting their starters in the second half of almost every game. I'm going to take Clemson minus the 28 over Virginia. Do want to remind you, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the like button. It all helps keep it absolutely free. I'm willing to dish you out free information all year long right here. That's all you have to do. Subscribe, hit the like, post it every once in a while. I'm giving you these free plays, free winners every single week. Make sure you enjoy that. And do check out for the Inside the Press Box for the postseason. Just $89. I'll walk you through every single bowl game. Put all my information out there, my computer's forecast, plus the NFL playoffs through the Super Bowl. $79 right now, and you get Phil Steele Plus for free. Don't forget about that. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a great championship weekend. I'll be back with you next Friday. I know there's only one game. I'll have some stuff up for you. There's NFL, there's FCS. We'll have stuff up for you. And thank you for taking the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections.